Most of the residents of the Champlain Towers South are asleep. They are secure in their beds, operating under the assumption that the concrete floor beneath them is solid. 7 minutes later, that assumption and the building itself disintegrates. And so in seconds, a 12-story oceanfront asset collapses into a pile of rubble. 98 lives are lost. The headlines the next morning called it a tragedy. They called it an unforeseen accident. But if you look at the forensic engineering data, as I have, realize it wasn't an accident. It was an equation and a mathematical inevitability. 3 years before the collapse in 2018, an engineer formally warned board that the waterproofing on the pool deck had failed. It warned of major structural damage to the concrete slab. The cost to fix it, $9 million. The board blinked. The owners argued $9 million felt like too much money. It felt like a discretionary expense. So they debated, they delayed, they deferred it. By April 2021, the cost hadn't stayed at $9 million. It had ballooned to $15 million, nearly 70% increase in just 3 years. But the real cost wasn't $15 million. So the real cost was total asset loss, a $1 billion legal settlement, and the lives of nearly 100 people. This is what I call the mathematics of neglect. We are currently besieged by a silent financial crisis in our governance structures. It is not a crisis of liquidity. Instead, it is a crisis of solvency caused by a fundamental failure in asset stewardship. We operate under a pervasive misconception that maintenance is a dial we can turn down to preserve cash flow. We treat asset integrity like it's an option. So today, I'm going to show you why deferred maintenance is not a saving. It is a form of unauthorized borrowing. It is a shadow liability on the business balance sheet that compounds at 7% every year, at a rate that destroys equity faster than it even created it. By the end of this briefing, you will never look at a capital budget request the same way again. We are going to audit the true cost of inaction. So the old way of governance looks at a building, an infrastructure, a bridge, or a power grid and sees a static asset. You build it, you use it, and eventually you replace it. But this view is hallucination. The reality is that companies' assets are in a constant state of entropy. And when you pause maintenance, you are not just pausing a timeline, you are allowing a defect to enter a dynamic growth phase. So let's diagnose the 3 governance blind spots that obscure this critical reality. Spot number 1, 7%. Blind spot number 1, the 7% compounding rule. When you look at industry benchmarks verified by BOMA, tells us that deferred maintenance costs compound at roughly 7% annually. So why 7%? It is a convergence of 3 pressures. Pressure 1 is the construction inflation. The cost of fixing it later is always higher than fixing it now. Then you have the scope creep. A simple plumbing leak becomes saturated drywall, which becomes black mold, which becomes a structural remediation project. And then the next is the operational inefficiency. So a degraded asset burns more energy. Clock chiller can increase your utility operational expenditure by between 15 to 20% a year. So if you defer a $1 million repair today, 10 years from now, that liability doesn't just double linearly. It grows to nearly $2 million of pure debt against your equity. And yet, we miss this because of blind spot number 2, which is the accounting arbitrage. This is where the corporate structure betrays us. We have a pervasive incentive rooted in the war between CapEx, the capital expenditures, and OpEx, the operational expenditures. Now, OpEx is your daily maintenance. It hits your EBITDA immediately. If your CEO or facilities manager want to hit your quarterly bonus, the fastest lever to pull is slashing your OpEx budget, you stop painting, you delay the boiler service. Suddenly, your profits look great, you look efficient, but you haven't created value. You have simply transmuted a small operational expense into a massive future capital expenditure. But the reality is you haven't created value. You have simply transmuted a small operating expense into a massive future capital expenditure. You have starved an asset to feed the bottom line in the short term. This is an accounting artifact that subsidizes current earnings with future capital distraction. And so this leads to the blind spot number 3, which is the hyperbolic discounting. This is the psychological mechanism behind the neglect. Behavior economics teaches us that humans value immediate rewards disproportionately higher than future risk. Board of directors will fight to save $100,000 in this year's budget because that saving is concrete. It's right here, right now. The potential $5 million liability 10 years from now, that feels abstract. It feels like someone else's problem. This is the principal agent problem. The agent, the CEO or the politician, has a time horizon of 2 to 4 years, an election cycle, or a contract term. The asset, the bridge or the tower, has a failure horizon of 10 to 20 years. The politician who raises taxes to fix a sewer pipe gets voted out. On the other hand, the politician who ignores the pipe and built a shiny new park gets re-elected. We are wired to choose the visible short-term win over the invisible long-term stewardship. So the result is U.S. facility backlogs have breached over $500 billion. This isn't a backlog. It is a lien against the equity of our entire infrastructure. So if the old way is based on illusions, then what then is the reality? We need to adopt a new operating system based on the physics of failure. This takes us beyond that 7% rule. The 7% rule is actually conservative. If you look at it, it assumes degradation is a smooth curve. In the physical world, failure is geometric. I want to introduce you to the most terrifying rule in asset management, inverse square rule. David Todd Geaslin, an industrial maintenance expert, discovered that if you defer a repair until the next level of failure, the cost doesn't double, it squares. Let's look at the mechanics. Each one, which is the part where you have a brake shoe on a truck, costs $40 to replace. This is $40 to the power of 1. Stage 2 is the assembly where you ignore the brake shoe. The rivets score the drum. Now you have to replace the entire drum assembly. The cost is now $40 squared. And that's $1,600. And so the third stage, which is the system, the brakes fail on the highway, the truck jackknives, you are looking at recovery cost, liability, and insurance. The cost is now $1,600 squared. You are at $2.5 million. This geometric progression underpins the 1-10-100 rule. Spending $1 on prevention, a $400 shingle repair, stops entropy at the source. You wait a few weeks, let the water hit the decking, and you are spending $10 for a structural patch. You wait a season, let the mold bloom and the trusses rot, and you are spending $100 for a total wear-off. When you defer maintenance, you are betting that you are on the shallow end of the curve. But as the Champlain Towers showed us, you are usually standing on the edge of a cliff. Let's look at this globally. This isn't just about buildings or infrastructure. It's about national security. Look at South Africa's ESCOM. In the early 2000s, they had a surplus of power, but as demand grew, the government deferred the deep maintenance required for their coal fleet to keep the lights on and save money. They ran the turbines into the ground. It was the industrial equivalent of running a marathon on a broken ankle with painkillers. And so the result, the grid collapsed into permanent load shedding. The economy is losing billions annually. This is what happens when you ignore the mechanics of the machine. So how do we fix this? We need to flip the equation using the predictive technology. We have data from JLL that is absolutely staggering. They found that a preventative maintenance program on HVAC systems yields an ROI of 545%. How? By extending the asset life, improving the energy efficiency by 18%, and reducing downtime by 40%. But we can go further. We are moving from preventative, time-based to predictive, condition-based. We use Internet of Things sensors, vibration sensors on pumps, moisture sensors on roofs, so that we can detect the failure at the $1 stage way before it ever becomes a $100 disaster. This is the new maintenance mix. The industry target is 80% preventative and 20% reactive. If you are in firefighting mode, fixing things only after the break, you are paying a premium for chaos. Now let's bring all this together into a master framework for what I call integrated fiduciary governance. We need to redefine what it means to be a director, because currently we look at the fiduciary duty as protecting the stock price. But the King IV report on corporate governance, the global benchmark, challenges us to go even deeper. Principle 11 states that the governing body must govern risk to support strategic objectives. Here is the connection. Asset failure is a strategic risk. You cannot have a valid corporate strategy if it is built on a crumbling asset base. If your factory cannot produce because the roof is leaking, your market share strategy is irrelevant. We need to bridge that CapEx OpEx divide using the total cost of ownership, the TCO. Your blueprint must include ring fencing. Maintenance budgets must be protected from operational cuts, because you cannot raid the repair fund to pay for the company retreat. It must be sacrosanct. We need to mandate state of good repair reports alongside our financial audits, because the deferred maintenance backlog should not be a secret. It must be a disclosed liability on the books, visible for the governance to view. This is about creating a safe harbor for governance. Managers should be rewarded for risk reduction, for the cost they avoided, rather than just the budget they didn't spend. When you implement this blueprint, you stop playing the lottery with your infrastructure. Instead, you move from the chaos of inverse square rule to the stability of the 545% ROI. The mathematics of neglect are unforgiving. Gravity is relentless. Erosion is also relentless. The 7% compounding rule is a form of financial gravity that is pulling underfunded assets toward insolvency every single day. But remember Geaslin's rule. It is the sudden impact. It's the moment gravity wins. The tragedy of the Argo Center Mall in Canada wasn't just about rust. It was about a culture that chose buckets and taps over structural repair for 32 years. It was about deceiving the public to preserve cash flow for asset managers, for board members, for public officials. The lesson is non-negotiable. Maintenance is a debt. You have borrowed functionality from the future. You can pay the principal today voluntarily at a rational price, or you can default tomorrow. But in the physics of infrastructure, default doesn't mean a Chapter 11 restructuring. It means the bridge falls, the grid goes dark, water stops running, the loan is always called in. You have a choice. You can be the extractor who mines the asset for short-term gain, or you can be the steward who preserves the capital for the next generation. I want you to take action today. So I've developed a GEM asset audit. It is a tool designed to help you calculate your own shadow liability and present the inverse square argument to your board. It's available in the vault. Download it, run the numbers, and stop the compounding. I'm Dr. Enock. This is more than governance. It is about survival.